And so this pain was just the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. It was consistent. It was daunting. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. And so I made a conscious decision. And, I was the type of person during that time. It took me until, my 30s before I even smoked weed. So I was very, very anti-drug. You couldn't get me to do. And I lived and was in a relationship back in Philadelphia early on as a teenager with someone who was using drugs, and we lived together. So that was just something that I was just very much against. But you just never know what will happen to a person. And so I made a decision that whatever it took for me to get out of that pain, that I would do it. And I never forget asking this lady who I worked with at Cedars-Sinai, I says, "What is it with this cocaine?" And she said to me, "Well, that's the drug that all of the Hollywood stars use. And if you're anybody, if you're an elite, then that's the thing to do." And so I ran with that, not thinking that it was addictive at all, but something that would get me out of the pain that I was in. And so there started my drug use. And of course, it just went from snorting, it went to freebasing, it went to injection drug use, it then went to crystal meth for many, many years. And it took me, and I got out of that pain. I got out of that pain. But of course, I was faced with another just like 10 years of just what I call darkness, just darkness. I became homeless, living out on the streets of Los Angeles, the danger that's associated with that, engaging in things that, I normally just would not engage in, subjecting myself to diseases from intravenous drug use. And it actually was Carl Bean. And even in between all of that, and so they moved from the Ebony Showcase Theater to a church on Jefferson, I believe it was Jefferson Boulevard. And there started the Unity Fellowship movement. Is a movement. Started in Los Angeles, but then it migrated across the entire country. And so I remember talking to Carl because at that time, this is maybe 85, 86, the latter part of 80, I just could not seem to get into recovery. I would fall, I would get back up, I would fall. And I was just so destitute at that time. And I never will forget that Carl, and this was having somebody, a pastor, that you could really talk to. Never had that before. Never had that you could get to the exact nature of what's really going on. And he reached out to me and held my hand. I never will forget this. And he told me that I did not have to live that way, that there was something inside me, that God had already planted something inside me, that I could be victorious against the addiction that I was going through. And while it didn't sort of ring true at that moment, it planted that seed. And subsequently, I was introduced a few years later to a 12-step program, which further affirmed much of what the liberation, and I won't say it's a theology, but once you are liberated in your spiritual thinking, you cannot go back to the way that it used to be. And one thing that the 12-step Narcotics Anonymous program did for me is it allowed me the freedom to have a spirituality of my very own. And that was also transformative. And such that that spark that Carl Bishop Bean had planted finally came to fruition in 1991. Now, I could not get into recovery in LA. I just could not do it. So I left LA and I went back to Philadelphia. And that's where I got into a long-term recovery in Philadelphia. And so I just am indebted to Bishop for the seed that he planted, for the nurturing, for the encouragement, and for the love, for the love of just caring for our community in a way that I just don't know that any other person did. And he spawned other persons in, because he also was a Motown star
Oh, absolutely.
who had one of the most prolific disco records. I Was Born This Way. That was
Yes.
also adopted by Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
So he was prolific in a variety of different ways, but he also attracted other people to our movement that we have to acknowledge, we have to appreciate, we have to love. Dionne Warwick, Maxine Waters, Elton John, all of these people who were soldiers in our journey around HIV/AIDS just cannot go underestimated. And and
Oh,
and Bishop really was instrumental in that process. And again, August the 16th, 2023, we celebrated 32 years in long-term recovery, and another milestone in July 13th, 2023, we turned 70 years old. Can you believe it? Seemed like it was just yesterday. Oh my God, where did the years go? 70 years. But I feel like I am the most fortunate man on the face of the earth. First of
oh,
all, to have gone through what I've gone through. I was shot in Los Angeles and almost died, during those dark years, in addition to the homelessness. Um, but being saved through all of that, and being protected. I know somebody had to be watching out for me, because I could tell you some stories that would make my bald head, like my hair, stand straight up, to be honest with you. But I was allowed to come out of all of that. And so what I'm doing today, my life purpose centers around helping others who just gave freely of themselves to help me uh, to where I'm at today. And early in my recovery journey, I've always loved education. Even in my teenage years, when I was frequenting, gay bars, I had my book bag and my books with me. And so one of the first things I did was to go back to school. And that was part of my recovery journey. So I went back. I already had associates in respiratory therapy. I went back with the encouragement of the 12-step program, which has been phenomenal, and got my bachelor's. And then I had people in the fellowship that said, you should go on and get a master's. And so I went in, and we got a master's. And some more people said, well, you don't need to stop there. Go ahead and get a doctorate. And so I got my PhD from the University of Georgia. And along the way, my research and my focus has always been on African American LGBTQ issues. My thesis was on the Black church and its treatment of Black gay men during the HIV/AIDS epidemic. That was my thesis. My dissertation was how Black men who have sex with men learn to cope with homophobia and racism. So my research trajectory has been focused on the LGBT in the African American community, of course, overall, but more specifically in the LGBT community, because that's where I came through. That's where I feel like the need is. That's where oftentimes our needs are understated and uh, under and our contributions underappreciated. And I see you're wearing a Bayard Rustin shirt. And thank you for him. Thank you for our heroes. There never would have been a March on Washington without Bayard. And so the other thing I think is so important for us to acknowledge, not only the lack in our community, because there are a lot of needs in our community, but there also is this rich camaraderie. Like during the early 80s, right? We were burying our friends every day, sometimes 2 or 3 funerals a day. But we came together. There were times when the church turned their back and families turned their back on those with HIV. We funeralized them in bars. And so uh, we were there for one another. We encouraged one another, and we supported one another during those early years. And that work oftentimes is underrated.
I want to underscore something that I'm hearing, and I want to ask you if you agree. One of the things that I'm hearing as a thread throughout your conversation is the fact that you, and frankly all of us, need community with us. Like, you are carrying those people, because I've heard you use the word we, right? And I'm like, he's carrying all of these people with him. All of those folks who've poured into you are with you on this journey. And that's important, that we acknowledge our communities that love and support us. Am I hearing, is what I'm saying true?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tell you, it's because of people like Bishop Bean, fellowships and support from 12 Steps, as well as my family. My family loves me. That was a journey, but they love me. And to really know that what I've gone through can really help other people to overcome, like the same things that Bishop Bean told me, I tell other people. I hold other people's hands. And I tell you, just going back to those early 80s as a respiratory therapist in West Hollywood, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center was in West Hollywood. And we saw, even before the epidemic was publicized, we were getting these young white gay men into our respiratory intensive care unit. They were going on, intensive respiratory support and ventilators, and many of them never came off. Many of them died. And there are, particularly for African Americans, there were people in the hospital who died alone because their families left them. And, I made a concerted effort that if I saw any of those people, even if I didn't know them, and many of them I did not know, but I would be there just to be there, not necessarily even always saying anything to them, because a lot of them were on ventilators and they were intubated. And so they really couldn't talk, but just being there and just holding their hand the same way that Carl Bean held my hand, to just let them know that they weren't alone, even though their families had left them. And here's the ironic thing. Back then, the family had a say-so in who could come and visit. And so oftentimes they would not allow the friends to come and visit. And so you had these people, these patients with HIV who died alone. And that is just the worst kind of feeling. But, it just allowed me to just do whatever I could just so that they wouldn't be alone.
And thank you so much for your work, your continued work. I have two additional questions I want to ask you. And it does have to do with folks who currently use substances or have in the past. And my question to you is, why is it important for us as a community, as the Black LGBTQ plus community, that we don't take our eye off the ball as it relates to substance use and the needs that folks who use substances have?
Great question. There's a quote by John Donne, and it was reiterated by Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. No man is an island unto himself. Every man is a part of the continent, a part of the main. Therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. What that means is I'm diminished anytime somebody else dies from HIV, from an overdose of substances, because of fentanyl, which are killing our community.
Absolutely.
at unprecedented rates, and we're not really talking about it. We're not really focusing on it because we're so focused on the opioid epidemic and its impact on basically the white community, while crystal meth is raging in our community. Racism, and I tell you, I have never experienced more racism from the white gay community as I have, as a matter of fact, more so than from the general community. And so we really need to collectively understand that this impacts all of us. And I really want to center this particular point not just from the external community, but within the Black gay community, because we do and say things that hurt each other. We can no longer afford to marginalize the trans community.
Absolutely.
We can no longer afford to marginalize bisexuality. So when we're saying we're doing the work of LGBTQ, let's do the lesbian, let's do the gay, let's do the bisexual, let's do the trans, let's do all of those, and to treat them from a holistic, intersectional perspective. And so many of us who are, and I want to, kind of speak briefly to providers, because I really feel like, we that are working in the field, that are tasked with helping our community, really first need to identify and address our own biases. We all come to the table with bias. So when we talk about, many people talk about cultural competency. Well, I say it's cultural humility.
Yes.
It is looking at each one of us and basically identifying and addressing our own biases. And also ageism within our community. Yes, many of us are living long-term from HIV or from substance use. And one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with is loneliness and marginalization within our own Black gay community. There's still stigma around HIV within our own community. So we've got to take the mantle up within our community. So when we can begin to address some of those issues within our own community, I think we really will do a great service. And also language. Now we are engaging in affirming kinds of care. And I'm talking to providers, people who are working with the community, that stigmatized language has to be replaced with more affirming language. So, for example, when we're talking about substance, we're talking about addiction, we no longer refer to them as addicts. We say,
absolutely.
We say person-centered language. We use person-centered language, a person with a substance use disorder, a person with an opioid use disorder, marijuana use. We want to humanize our community because we've been so dehumanized over the years. Well, we no longer, use the term homosexuality. In the African American community, I prefer the term same gender loving that was coined by Cleo Monango in the mid-90s because it more reflects who we really, really are. Now, of course, men who have sex with men was used for scientific purposes, and that's fine. But that's not who we are. We are not just about running around here just having sex with one another. We love, we feel, we contribute to society, we are parents. And here's the other great thing. I am now a grandparent. Can you believe that?
Congratulations.
Thank you. 19-month-old granddaughter that is just the love of my life. These are the gifts of recovery. When I say I'm living a fulfilled life, who would have thought? Who would have thought in those dark years that God would just do such magnificent things as give me a daughter and a granddaughter at 70? And so, I think there's just so much that we can do, for our community and within our community. We can support LGBTQ plus organizations financially. Sure, we depend on funding, but it's all too often one little small pot of money and all of the organizations are vying for it. So where we can, it's important that we support. And just in Atlanta, Georgia, we've got such a plethora of organizations that's doing such meaningful work, that's doing such phenomenal kinds of interventions and research. We've got to support them as well. And coming from a 12-step kind of program philosophy, it took me some time to open up to harm reduction. But that's certainly given them, 44%. There's been a 44% increase in overdose deaths in the African American community. 44%. We've got to do something.
Wow.
And meeting people where they are is something that I've embraced. And so there are harm reduction kinds of things where, we meet people where we are, and we hope that one day maybe that they will become obstinate. But certainly that should not be a precursor to resources and services. And so that's very, very important. And the other thing too is many of us that are working in organizations, we hope that the leadership in these organizations reflect the population that's being served. From counselors to physicians to those organizations, not only that are serving LGBTQ, but that are also referring LGBTQ to other kinds of services and making sure that they are affirming, that they are respectful. And we can say something. We can say something at these organizations and challenge their leadership when they don't reflect the population that we serve. When the website does not reflect, persons of color, BIPOC persons, when that's the majority of the populations that you're served. And so just those kinds of things. And one last thing I think is just so important, and that is involving our community in research.
Dr. Lawrence Bryant, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on The Reckoning. I must say, I appreciate you and all the work that you are doing and all that you have done. And just all that all of that is magnificent. So thank you.
And thank you
for not taking your eye off the ball.
And thank you for allowing us space to just have this discussion.